Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and yes, that is a bit of a new background. Covered up some of those ratty looking blue acoustic panels back there, so hope you like it, and it's wavy. All right, today we are talking about the iFi Uno. Little entry level. This is an $80 piece. It is a DAC and headphone amp all-in-one unit from iFi. All right, so this will be our subject of discussion today. So we will dive into what makes this thing tick here right after shameless self-promotion. Hey, thanks for watching this video. Please remember to hit that like button, and if you haven't, please subscribe. Also, I have a Patreon set up so that you can help support me on a monthly basis, and I've set up a PayPal donation so that you can help me out in that way too if a monthly subscription does not make sense for you. Links for all of that, including the benefits, in the description below. Please check those out. All right, on with the show. All right, so as mentioned in the intro, this is an $80 device. It is available for sale at numerous places. I can link to a couple down in the description. And yeah, it bears repeating that this is a all-in-one DAC and headphone amplifier in here. It also has some equalization circuits in it and all of that. And it's pretty interesting. I was pretty excited to get this piece in because I know I do a lot of high-end stuff on this channel, but I don't want to ignore the entry level. And I want to help people both get into this hobby and then help them on their journey as they seek listening enjoyment and all of that. So this was pretty exciting here because I have done some reviews of some entry-level audiophile grade headphones, and I did a kind of a roundup video of those too, so I'll put a link down below to that as well. And so getting a piece like this in at $80, it's like how well can it handle some of those entry-level headphones, and does it lower the barrier into getting into our audiophile hobby? So those were some questions that I was eager to answer about this thing. All right, so we'll get into that here a little bit. So yeah, the guts of this thing, if you're interested, just get some features out of the way. It is built around an ESS Sabre DAC chip. So iFi seems to have moved away from the Burr Brown solutions and they have gone with ESS lately. And so that is in here. This will decode just about all things two-channel audio that you should worry about or need to worry about. It does PCM files up to 32-bit 384 kilohertz. It has DSD decoding on it. It has MQA decoding on it if you need that. Okay, so other than that, it plugs in via USB-C connection to a PC or whatever your music source is, and that. So that's like the long and the short of it. It's tiny, it's light, it's $80. Let's cut to a clip here where I do a unit tour and talk about some of the build and what all of this is and all of that. And then we'll come back on the other side of that and we'll talk about the sound. Unit tour, we'll go ahead and do the overhead view again because this thing is small and I think it will be easier to see from this vantage point. Like, how small is this little Uno device? Well, here is my Canon N6 Mark II DAP right here, just for scale. Just turn that over so the reflection doesn't get distracting, and you can see that the Uno is smaller. Okay, definitely smaller. All right, just for scale there, so you can see that. Okay, front panel. There is no power button here. It turns on and off by clicking the volume wheel here. So you click it there, it goes off. All right, now that just made it lose signal to the computer that I have it plugged into. I have a laptop over here off camera, so you can see it. You turn it on, okay, it starts green, or at least it glows green back behind the volume knob there, volume knob power switch. I mean, turn it like this to get louder, unsurprisingly. The color in there is correlated to the file type being played to some extent. It's green for PCM files, looks like up through 96 kilohertz. And then it's yellow if it goes above 96 kilohertz. So like if I play a 192 file, that will go yellow. And then it's like a cyan blue, basically this color. Right, back behind there, if it's a DSD file, I'm sure it's something different for MQA, but I do not have any MQA files, and I'm not a title user to be able to say what color that is in there. I'm sure it's in the product literature somewhere. Anyway, rest of the front panel here, we have this EQ button right here, right? And that corresponds to these lights. So here we go. This is no EQ. There are 3 EQ settings, I guess 4. One is none. That's what it's currently on right now. The other one is this little logo here. Let's see if it'll show up. Yeah, there we go. Looks like a game controller. And then we have another logo that looks like the YouTube logo. And then we have another one that is a music note, right? So these are equalizer preset indicators for a game mode, of film or a video watching mode for like movies, TV shows, YouTube, all that, and a music mode. Okay, I'll talk more about the effects of these when we get to the sound settings, because they do, I mean, they are equalization. They do affect the sound. Anyway, and you cycle through those by hitting this EQ button right here. Okay, it goes to game first, hit it again for the video mode, hit it again for music mode, hit it again to go off. All right, next button over is power match. And this is basically a gain control, and that little white LED lights up when it is engaged. Okay, we already talked about the volume knob. The volume knob actually has pretty good feel to it, even though it's small. I mean, the whole thing about this is small, but I mean, I don't have particularly large hands. I did not have any trouble grabbing this. Worked fine. Uno logo, and then a 3.5 millimeter. iFi calls this S-balanced output. I did not try any balanced connections to it. Maybe it'll work, but 3.5 millimeter single-ended, everything definitely works. So that's the headphone output. Round back. This is a USB-C input. Like I say, it's plugged into a computer right now, so you can see it lit up, right? But that's a USB-C input, and then this cable right here is just the stock generic USB-C cable that came with it. It's an $80 device. I'm not going to mess with aftermarket USB cables on an $80 device. All right, you see all kinds of logos and indicators in here. We've got the high-res audio sticker. Takes you to product information. Here we have a stereo single-ended RCA analog output. So you can access just the DAC output without the headphone amp section in there from here. Now, I don't see any switches or anything on this. This is a variable output, so it is a preamp basically that you control the volume of those outputs from here, all that. Now, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess depending on how you look at it, I did not notice that the EQ presets come through the analog RCA outputs here. It controls volume, so it's preamp, but it seems to bypass the equalization circuit here. So I think the equalization circuit only comes out the headphone output, if that is important to you. Okay, then more logos, DSD, MQA, because this decodes pretty much everything you would ever need it to. The bottom, we've got these two, and you can see there's dust on it already, but we've got these two like rubber sticky feet. And they actually are quite handy because putting very little downward force on this and just moving it forward and backwards, it mostly wiggles the table like this. And I like that because this thing is so small and light that if it didn't have those, like any kind of RCA plug or even headphone cable out here that's heavier and like drooping off the edge of the table would pull this around, like so many light pieces of audio gear have happened to them. But those sticky feet do a really good job. Like again, I'm putting very little downward force on this and it's wiggling my whole table when I go like that. Like they are quite effective, but remarkably, okay, there's very little stickiness if I just lift it up. It seems to do a good job of preventing only sliding across the tabletop motion. All right, so I mean, other than that, yeah, it's tiny, it's easy to use. There is the one quirk about this being a pre-out instead of a line-out. Oh, while I'm here, I should also mention that I checked this too. Many devices, when you plug in a headphone, will mute the analog output from the DAC here. This does not. Both outputs seem to be live all of the time. Okay, so I plugged this into my 2.1 channel speaker system right here, just ran these outputs into my Shitsaga preamp, and then I plugged in a set of headphones, and everything played. Both the headphones had volume and the outputs here, and then turning this knob, both the 2.1 channel stereo system and the headphones got louder, so this volume control is wired to both of them. I think they are both active because I'm pretty sure these, like, I did not hear the preamp or the EQ settings affect this output at all, only this one. So I think somewhere they just split the signal from the DAC. One signal goes through the EQ circuit and then through the amp, and the other one just goes to this output, still controlled by the potentiometer here. Okay. That could be important information for some. I think that's it as far as the features in the build and all that we need to talk about. Let's get on to the sound. All right, let's get into test gear and sound on this thing then. So the headphones that I plugged in here, I used a variety. I used the highest end headphone that I used was my Focal Radiance. And then I did a couple or several more entry-level pieces. Like I tried the Hi-Fi Mint HE400 SE. I tried the Massdrop plus Sennheiser HD58X Jubilee. And let's see, what else was in there? I used the Massdrop plus Sennheiser HD6XX to see how this would handle a 600 or a 300 ohm load, excuse me. And I also used the Sivga SV023, which I'm working on a review for. And then for IEMs, I plugged my Mangard TV1 into this for a little bit too, mostly to check for noise floor. The source device that I used for this was predominantly my Microsoft Surface Pro 4 laptop tablet kind of thing, plugged in via USB using the stock USB-C cable here. I did check the DAC output here by wiring this into the input of a Monolith Liquid Spark headphone amp, and then also briefly plugged this into my 2-channel speaker system, which currently consists of a Shitsaga preamp with a Sylvania VT231, yes, NAS 6SN7 tube from like 1945, something like that, an Adcom GFA 555 Mark II amplifier, and then a pair of ELAC UB52 speakers and a pair of SVS SB2000 subwoofers, SB1000, excuse me, subwoofers. Okay, so that was the test gear. For the sound here, I'm not going to belabor it too much, and that's because, for one, I think it's pretty solid for what it is. And it is fair and necessary to say for what it is, because this is an $80 piece that does digital to analog conversion, equalization, and headphone amplification if you want to use the headphone amp part in it. That's a lot to pack into an $80 package that is this size, right? And really, it's pretty decent. This overall sonic character, if you're familiar with iFi's line of Zen DACs and their ZenCan amp, like those tended to lean a little bit warmer and smoother than their competition. And I would say that this is similar. Like, it sonically reminded me of that Zen DAC sound, where it wasn't quite true neutral. It was just a little bit warmer, thicker, and a little bit smoother, but still with some good dynamic punch, and still with some sparkle up top yet to go along with it. And that was pretty much here too. I do think that this is a little bit smoother and more relaxed than a lot of the entry-level pieces that I have heard that are built around ESS DAC. So even though I think some of the warmth and smoothness of the Zen line is at least partially because of the Burr Brown chips on those devices, the ESS chip in here seems to be well implemented. I did not get a ton of digital glare or harshness in the treble here. So it was a fairly smooth and non-fatiguing sound, which I think is good here, because a lot of entry-level gear can just get really bright and sharp and brittle up top. And for the most part, this did not do that. Okay, so the sound staging has a good bit of width to it, but it's, it's very flat wall of sound, which is common and not at all surprising for a device of this price. So it's right where it needs to be in terms of that. The imaging and separation are pretty good. Again, for the price, you get a fairly reasonably holographic spatial presentation laterally. Again, not a lot of depth, not much height, but at least laterally, okay, you get that. All right, and then detail retrieval. I mean, again, it's not going to be set the world on fire resolving, but for an $80 piece, it certainly is a noticeable step up from just using the built-in headphone output on a laptop computer or a tablet or something like that. Like, it's definitely a noticeable step up from there. Now, let's talk about things like power output and all of that, because again, this is a USB-powered device as well, and the USB port on the back here is spec'd at a 5-volt, 500 milliamp, so half an amp input, which means it's going to have a grand total of 2.5 watts of total power to do anything with. And so some of those 2.5 watts are going to have to go through like powering up all the lights, making the output here live, and just generally pushing electrons and signal through this thing. And so that's going to use up a lot of the power before we ever get to the headphone output. So there's not going to be a ton of power here. And so that does have some drivability implications on some headphones. Now, for IEMs, it's going to be all the power you really need. It's got a very, very low noise floor. I did not hear any noise. Like, I plugged my Manger TV1 in here, turned the volume up all the way, did not hear any hiss or anything like that. So that's good. Okay. For the most part, the power output here is fine for most headphones, even up to 300 ohms. It was doing pretty okay, especially through the mids and treble. Where you notice the power output here is that the bass can get a little bit sloppy and a bit distorted, really in the low sub bass, particularly if you try to put the bassy EQ on here, which I'll talk about here in a moment. But it does run out of steam, like with the HE400 SE, with the HD6XX and all that, which are fairly hard to drive loads. Like, you can tell it was struggling, particularly in the low end, to do the bass. Now, it didn't sound horrible, and it doesn't come up on every piece of program material that you put in here, but like Hans Zimmer, a lot of hard-hitting hip-hop kind of music and all of that, where there's just a lot of really hard-hitting low bass or a lot of low rumble, you can tell that it's out of its comfort zone with loads like the HE400 SE, the HD6XX, and all of that. It's pretty good in the low bass, even with the bass boost of the music EQ circuit. And again, I'll talk about the EQ here in a moment. It's pretty good with that on the 5.8X. Okay, the Radiance does not need a bass boost. Okay, and this handled the low end on that really well. Again, for what it is, sounded pretty good there. So the power output here is pretty decent. It handles a fairly wide range of headphones reasonably well. Struggles in the low end with some harder to drive loads. Now, that may or may not be a problem for you depending on music taste, again, because if you're not into bass heavy music, you're probably not going to notice that on any of those. And even if you are, if you're comfortable with bass sounding kind of like, that trunk rattling sound that you get with subwoofers in the trunk of a car, every now and then, again, not horrible, not all the time, then, it's fine to use there too. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I think the sound is pretty good. What do these EQ things here do? The game mode kind of crystallizes the sound and gives everything a little bit sharper edge to it, and also enhances like the upper mids, lower treble a bit, I think, to help with and bring out spatial effects a little bit more. So I didn't use it much because I'm not a gamer, but just to check what it was doing, that to my ears what it was doing. The video mode here brings the mids forward to enhance dialogue clarity. I think very few headphones ever need that anyway, but it's there if you want it. And then the music button, I think, is mostly basically iFi's bass boost, because the thing that I noticed come forward mostly when that one was engaged was that the bass extended a little bit more, and there was a little bit more bass presence and just a little bit more dynamic punch in the low end, all that. Now, that does require more power, so like the distortion I was talking about here earlier on some of those harder to drive headphones there definitely becomes more apparent, okay, with that music EQ thing engaged, okay? But again, back to the questions that I asked earlier on, like, does this handle entry-level headphones reasonably well? Yeah, for the most part it does. Particularly low impedance dynamics that are easy to drive, not a surprise there. It does pretty well. it handles the HD58X Jubilee pretty well. That one only distorts in the bass, even with the music EQ / bass boost on, very rarely, and very rarely distractingly. You can find music for which it will do it, but it's not very often a problem. The HE400 SE, provided you do not use the stock cable on that thing, okay? Because the stock cable does introduce a treble peak that does make it very harsh. But if you use like a heart cable or something like that, which is reasonably priced, and the HE400 SE and this thing, that sounds pretty good. It's a very like smooth, non-fatiguing sound with some pretty good spatial capabilities considering the total price there, and some fairly good dynamic impact. It will distort a little bit, particularly with the bass boost thing on there. Again, in the low end on like, really low rumbly stuff from, like Hans Zimmer, or hard-hitting stuff from like Lindsey Sterling, or like I think I was listening to Atelians by Outkast, where there was some sloppiness in the bass that came out, more so than on other stuff on the HE400 SE. But it's still pretty decent overall, and that bass distortion only gets in the way every so often on some music genres. So it handles that headphone, fairly well in there, which is good, because I declared that one the best entry-level headphone at the current time when I did that Roundup video a while ago. Okay. The HD6XX, not bad. That one will distort again in the bass, but again, a 300 ohm load is really pushing this to its limits. But again, it mostly created a very listenable, enjoyable sound, even on that headphone, sometimes even with the bass boost engaged. So again, it's just, you can find music for which it will become a problem, but a lot of music is going to be okay. So yes, I think this is an exciting little product. Yes, I think it is a good entry point for someone who has one of those entry-level headphones and is still like, they're plugging it directly into a laptop or something, and they're asking the question, do I need a DAC or an amp? Does it really help? Get one of these and find out. It is good enough that it will convince you that a dedicated DAC / amp is helpful, okay? It definitely. I had a fair amount of good listening enjoyment, which again, not exquisite, not amazing, no, it's not Susvara level good, it's never going to be, but for what it is, it created a very engaging and enjoyable sound, I thought. Now, I like to do comparisons. I don't have a ton to compare to because I haven't heard a ton of products in this. The only other in this category, the only one that I remember, and it's been a long time since I've heard it, was the FIO K3. And I sold that one well over a year ago now, and even then I hadn't listened to it for a long time. I sold that to a friend who wanted to get another friend hooked on audio for basically the cost of shipping. I figured it was a worthy goal, right? Okay. And that one, again, it was good for what it was too, but I think that one had a little bit more of that like digital glare, and I don't remember it being quite as smooth or as like, as overall enjoyable as this one is. And again, that's going from memory, but that's about the only comparison point I can give you because I haven't heard a ton of things right here in this price range. But good little product, good little introductory to the audiophile space, and yeah, I think it will convince some people that, or many newbies in the hobby, that a dedicated DAC / amp or DAC amp really is a worthwhile investment and really does improve the sound over just plugging directly into a laptop or a tablet or something like that. So I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the iFi Uno. Thanks for watching. Please give a like and a subscribe. If you haven't yet, please comment down below. What do you think about this little thing, or how to get into this audiophile hobby? Please check out my PayPal, my Patreon, and all of those things. And as always, thanks for watching and enjoy the music.